None of the 4 Muslims detained in the pseudo-terrorist plot paid so dearly or had their lives devastated more than Jamal Khan. His mother was in a government hospital dying of cancer when he was arrested. She was in the last stages when her son wound up in prison charged with terrorism. 5 days later, she breathed her last breath. Jamal had 9 siblings. All his siblings were younger than he was. His father died a few years ago and he was the only breadwinner. Before his untimely death, the father was working as a coolie at Andheri railway station. The word coolie, meaning a laborer who carries luggage, suitcases, bags, and other travel accessories for passengers at a railway station. It has a variety of other implications and is sometimes regarded as offensive or a pejorative, depending upon the historical and geographical context. It is similar, in many respects, to the Spanish term peon, although both terms are used in some countries, with slightly differing implications. Coolies were forced by the colonists to move to the Americas and work as slaves in their new settlements. The British began shipping Indian coolies to colonies around the world. In that regard, coolies weren't different from the Africans who were taken as slaves through the transatlantic slave trade and brought to the New World to work without pay in the slave plantations. When Jamal's father expired, he didn't left anything for his big family to inherit except his name and a small chawl abode. Jamal's 3 sisters used to work in rich people's houses, but when they reached the age of puberty their mother stopped them from working. Jamal Khan was the firstborn, followed by his 3 sisters and then his 6 brothers. Poor people in India did not use condoms or any type of birth control. What added to the population explosion in India is the majority of destitute Indians had nothing else to do for enjoyment or pleasure except having sex. Indira Gandhi's son, Sanjay Gandhi, came up with a plan to stem the rapid population growth. He promised to pay a few thousand rupees to any Indian male who would agree to receive an injection to have himself permanently sterilized. His plan, however, was misused by government officials and police officers, forcibly performing vasectomies in order to meet quotas and in some cases, sterilizing women as well. Officially, men with 2 children or more had to submit to sterilization, but many young unmarried men, political opponents, the ignorant, and poor men were also believed to have been sterilized. Wherefore, the program was stopped because of its many abuses, total failure, and lack of accountability from its erroneous administration by officials. After Jamal Khan was arrested, his 3 sisters were forced to go work in the rich people's houses to help provide for their younger brothers. They were young themselves, being 13, 14, and 15 years old. The 14-year-old sister was impregnated by someone in one of the houses she worked in. It was illegal in India to impregnate a female at that age, but Jamal's sisters were ignorant of their rights. The 13-year-old sister fell in love with a teenager boy living near her chawl and she too got pregnant by him. When the 15-year-old sister discovered that her 2 sisters were pregnant, she beat them up and scolded them severely until the 2 sisters ran away. What made them run away was that the 15-year-old sister threatened that she was going to go to Jamal in prison and inform him about their pregnancies. India, like any other third world country, honor killing was a common practice, especially among Muslim families. The 2 small sisters expected that their brother would either manage to get out of jail and kill them for the sake of the family's honor or send someone to kill them. The sisters knew their names and their reputations among their chawl neighbors would be ruined. No one was going to respect them anymore, and no family would allow their son to marry a girl who had gotten pregnant outside of marriage. They also realized they were now considered whores and that other boys would hunt them down and force them to have sex whenever they ventured out in public. After they ran away, the 2 sisters went to Grand Road and joined the thousands of other prostitutes on Ferris Road. The 15-year-old sister did not know what to do after her sisters ran away. She went to her brother in jail and informed him what had happened to their sisters. Jamal wept bitterly when he learned about his 2 younger sisters becoming pregnant and running away. He blamed his sister for beating them up and scaring them off. He also blamed her for allowing them to go and work in people's houses. In order to avoid any further disaster to the family, Jamal told his 15-year-old sister to stop going to the rich people's houses. The sister told Jamal that they would starve to death if she stopped working. They had no money after he went to jail. Jamal was the only wage earner and provider for his family. This is why he had to wait before he could marry Rayhana and be with her. He sacrificed his love and did not present an obstacle for her going to Saudi Arabia so she could also provide for her own family. After she returned at the expiration of her 2-year work visa, he would marry her and perhaps join her in Saudi Arabia. Jamal was aware of the problems that were going to face his family from the day he was arrested and thrown behind bars, but he could do nothing. He placed his trust in Allah to work a miracle and provide for his family while he was away. Yet, there was no savior, only catastrophe and devastation. His 2 sisters had run away being victims of an immoral world and a wicked society. He felt he had to do something even though he was locked behind concrete walls and steel bars. He told his 15-year-old sister to contact his workplace and ask for a loan. His sister phoned the travel agency and talked to Mrs. Muhammad Khan, who was now in charge of the business after her husband was also arrested and taken into custody. Mrs. Khan refused to extend any credit to the poor family of her husband's former employee. She told Jamal's sister that business had fallen off and the office had a huge loan to pay off. Then, Jamal told his sister to talk to the employees of the travel agency and ask them for a donation or a soft loan until he was released from jail. None of the employees were willing to donate or loan any money to Jamal's family. Finally, when there were no other options available and everywhere they turned doors were shut in their faces, Jamal gave his sister permission to sell their chawl and move to a slum area and buy a small slum. Still being a minor, the 15-year-old sister sold the chawl but was seriously cheated by the woman who bought the house. The buyer of their chawl was a Hindu woman. She paid 10 times less than what she promised to pay. She cheated Jamal's sister and made her sign papers written in English. The 15-year-old girl understood nothing of what she signed. When she discovered that the Hindu woman had cheated her, she was scared to go to the police and complain for fear of being raped by the cops. She knew that at her young age the policeman would take advantage of her and possibly rape her. Therefore, she accepted the little amount that the buyer gave her and moved with her 6 little brothers to a very small slum. In the overcrowded slum, all the males harassed Jamal's young sister. She lived behind the shadow of her 2 pregnant sisters who ran away and became prostitutes on Ferris Road. The uncultured, backward males and slum people hovered over her day and night like evil spirits dwelling in a haunted house. Every man wanted to have sex with her. She would quarrel with them and scream for help whenever some boys came and tried to break in her slum and rape her at night. Jamal's sister followed the advice of her brother and stopped going to the rich people's houses. The little money that remained after she bought the slum did not last more than a couple of months. When the family ran out of food, she was forced to send her little brothers to the streets to beg. She managed to get a small job for one of her brothers. It was an unpaid job. He was working in a small coffee shop and the shopkeeper gave him only food to eat for cleaning the shop. He refused to give him money. One of the 4 small brothers who was begging on the streets got hit by a car and died. It was a hit-and-run accident and no one was able to get the license plate number of the car. The brother who was working in the coffee shop disappeared one day. No one knew whether he was kidnapped by Gondas or joined them willingly. Jamal's sister was afraid to go out looking for her brother to see what had happened to him. She was scared to go to the police too. She went to her brother in prison and told him what had happened to their 2 small brothers. Jamal wept bitterly and began to bang his head on the wall of the visiting room until blood ran down and covered his face. His sister began to cry and begged him to stop hurting himself. When Jamal continued to hit his head on the concrete wall, 2 jailers came and dragged him away by force. Another jailer shouted at the sister and chased her away. From that day on, the sister stopped visiting her brother in jail. When Jamal came out of jail after 6 months, he found his family was in deplorable condition and totally ruined. Some of his brothers were begging on the streets and 2 of his sisters had run away from home and had become prostitutes. 2 of his brothers ran away and joined the Gondas and his mother died of cancer. 1 of his brothers was killed in hit-and-run car accident. Whatever had happened to his family, he knew he couldn't change it. He just wanted to take care of his sister and remaining brothers. He went back to his workplace, but Muhammad Khan refused to see him and ordered the peon to throw him out if he didn't leave immediately. Jamal tried to talk to Muhammad again by going to his house and begging him for his job back in front of his wife and sons and daughters. The begrudging boss reminded Jamal of his affair with the Muslim woman, Rayhana Khan. He said to him, "You took advantage of the trust I had put in you and had an affair with the maidservant of one of my Arab clients. You stabbed me in the back and made my business client, Sheikh Ahmed, insult and humiliate me in front of my employees. What if you had gotten that woman pregnant and we had sent her pregnant to her sponsor?" Then, Muhammad reminded Jamal that when he applied for work with him he signed a contract for employment that specified he would adhere to certain standards and principles. According to those stipulations, no employee was allowed to have an inter-office romance or intimate relations with another employee. No employee was allowed to take advantage of his position and have an affair or inappropriate relationship with a client or customer. Muhammad said to Jamal, by having an affair with the maidservant of his most important Arab client, the business had suffered major losses. Muhammad Tours and Travels had received much bad publicity from his trial and arrest, and he suffered the mistrust of the air industry to do business with his office anymore. He claimed that because of his indiscretion, the wealthy Saudi, Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed, had broken his partnership with Muhammad Tours and Travels. After lecturing him for a long time, Muhammad threw Jamal out of his house. Nevertheless, Jamal Khan did not give up and kept phoning Muhammad's wife and begging her to convince her husband to take him back. Jamal told the wife what had happened to his family while he was in prison. Although she was a hard-hearted woman and no less wicked than her husband, Mrs. Khan was fed up with Jamal's continuous begging and pleading and agreed to ask her husband to give him another chance. She told him strictly never ever to repeat what he did before, namely, having an affair with a woman at work or a customer, and never ever do anything like that again behind her husband's back. Jamal swore he would abide by the rules and regulations of the job. When Mrs. Khan promised Jamal she would speak to her husband about getting his job back, Muhammad Khan happened to be on a 5-day business trip to New Delhi. She told Jamal to come back to the office after a week's time. Her husband would be back by that time and she said she would convince him to rehire him. In fact, her husband was in Bangalore enjoying another man's wife. He lied to her and told her that he was going to New Delhi to meet an important Arab client. Jamal believed the promise of Mrs. Khan and waited those 7 days. After Jamal was released from prison, he spent 5 weeks working various jobs. During those 5 weeks, he worked hard doing manual labor or whatever he could find to provide food for his sister and 3 brothers. The money he made was so little compared to what he used to make working in the travel agency. For that reason, he wanted to get his job back by all means. He wanted to send his sister and brothers back to school. He also wanted to buy another chawl and provide a better place to live for his family. He knew the slums were not safe for his teenager sister, especially when she started back to school. The slum area was full of jobless loafers, perpetual drunks, and dangerous gondas. While he was away working during the day, he was always afraid his young sister might be raped by useless, lawless scum. When Mrs. Khan promised she would speak to her husband about getting his job back, he had a glimmer of hope that perhaps they could rise above their hopelessness. Every waking moment and in his sleep, Jamal was counting the minutes and seconds for his boss to return from his business trip, so he could go back to work. Muhammad Khan had the bad habit of using his employees to spy on one another and report things back to him. He even used his peon to spy on his employees. Unbeknownst to Jamal, his troubles were mounting, and this time through the person who loved him completely. While Jamal was waiting for Muhammad to return to Bombay and take him back, Rehana Khan came to spy out the travel agency looking for him, and after everyone had left, she approached the peon. The peon knew that Jamal had been fired, so he didn't know why he had showed up at the travel agency. This was strange too, that this young Indian woman he had an affair with, also showed up looking for him. As part of his spying duties, the peon felt it was necessary to report the visit of the young Indian woman to his boss when he returned from his business trip. Another bump lay in the road ahead, which added to Jamal's troubles. While the wicked one was in Bangalore enjoying his time with another man's wife thanks to a steady supply of Viagra, another serious problem developed which was attributed to Jamal. Muhammad recruitment business suffered a considerable loss after Sheikh Ahmed stopped his business dealings with his office. Before the pseudo-terrorist plot, the old Saudi sent hundreds of work visas to the recruitment agency. Muhammad would sell the visas to Indians 10 times the actual amount of the visas. This highly profitable business venture with Sheikh Ahmed was the crux of the success for Muhammad Tours and Travels. When the partnership was severed, Muhammad business suffered major losses. He struggled to make ends meet. He tried hard to get new Arab clients, but none would commit to working with him. When nothing worked in his favor, he came up with a plan to force Sheikh Ahmed to have to deal with him only. He wanted to block the Saudis' ability to do business in Bombay so that he would come and beg him to accept his visas again. He did not want any other agency to profit from his business. To that end, he was prepared to use intimidation and threats against any travel agency that the old Saudi might be tempted to conduct transactions with. In order to carry out his plan, Muhammad kept spies everywhere. He even contacted some employees at the passport office and the Sahara International Airport. He knew that the old Saudi was perversely infatuated with the slum woman. He anticipated that he might use another travel agency to find Rehana Khan and fly her over to him. For this reason, he gave his spies at the passport office and the international airport the names of Rehana Khan and her daughter. He wanted to know which agency the old Saudi might be using to process the papers of the slum woman and her daughter. He was planning to use the Gondas to stop the agency from dealing with his ex-client. The first reported matter of espionage came from the passport office. While Muhammad was away in Bangalore, someone from among his spies at the passport office called his office and left a message. The informant mentioned that Rehana Khan had come along with one of the employees of Muhammad and applied for reissuance of her passport and her daughter's passport. The informant did not mention the name of the employee that accompanied Rehana Khan. As soon as Muhammad returned from his trip, his wife talked to him and requested he take Jamal Khan back as an employee. Somehow, she convinced him to take him back on a religious and humanitarian basis. She narrated to him the many tragedies that had struck his family and all that had happened to the Muslim brothers and sisters of Jamal while their brother was in prison. Muhammad agreed to give Jamal another chance. He told his wife that if Jamal Khan tried to do anything else behind his back, he would not only fire him, but he would send him to prison forever. When Muhammad arrived at his office the following day, his peon informed him about the young Indian woman who came and asked about Jamal Khan. At first, Muhammad did not take the information seriously because his peon did not tell him which woman came to inquire about Jamal. As soon as he entered his office, checked his answering machine, and heard the report of his operative from the passport office, he quickly connected the dots. He called his peon in and asked him to describe to him the woman who asked him about Jamal Khan. The peon described the woman and added he saw her before when she used to come with her daughter to the travel agency for her travel papers. He told his boss he remembered that Jamal used to go with the woman to help her do some work. When the peon gave the description of the slum woman, Muhammad almost exploded from the rage bubbling inside him. He concluded that somehow Jamal Khan was still in contact with Rehana Khan. His thought was that Jamal was helping her to get her passport reissued. He knew Jamal had access to all the information concerning Sheikh Ahmed while he was working for him at the travel agency. He figured Rehana met Jamal and got the phone number of Sheikh Ahmed from him. Then, she talked to the old Saudi and somehow managed to convince him to reissue new visas and tickets for her. When Sheikh Ahmed agreed to resend the visas and tickets, she asked her boyfriend to reprocess her paperwork. He quickly jumped to the conclusion that Jamal Khan was the employee that was with Rayhana at the passport office and applied for the reissuing of the passports for Rayhana and her daughter. Muhammad picked up his phone, called the police, and reported a serious crime had taken place in his travel agency. He told the police that he had already reported the crime long before, but nothing was done to the culprit. Due to some legal issues he was involved in, he got distracted from following up to make sure justice was done. After he was released from prison, he decided to pursue the crime that had been committed by one of his male employees against one of his female employees. The next day, when poor, pitiful Jamal Khan came to see about getting his job back, he found the police waiting for him at the travel agency. He was arrested, tied up, and taken into custody for the very serious charges of rape and robbery. When Jamal was informed about the charges against him, he strongly denied them. No matter how much he was beaten and tortured by the police, he refused to admit the false allegations. The future of his sister and his brothers were in his hands, and for these very strong reasons he preferred to be beaten to death than to admit to false charges and endanger their lives. The determination of Jamal not to admit to the charges led the police to investigate the complaint further. The first person the police tried to get hold of and question was the female employee that allegedly had been raped and robbed by Jamal. Unfortunately, when the police found the slum where Bulbula Sheikh used to live while she was working at the travel agency, they did not find her. The police found out through her family that she died a couple of months ago. The family refused to reveal the cause of her death. The police questioned the neighbors and were told the cause of her death was that she had committed suicide. The police went to the hospital where her body was taken after she committed suicide. The medical report confirmed her suicidal death. The report mentioned that Bulbula was pregnant at the time she took her life. On the basis of the medical report, the police concluded that Bulbula Sheikh was impregnated by her rapist, Jamal Khan. The Bombay police had found enough evidence to condemn Jamal Khan for rape. At trial, Muhammad Khan placed his right hand on his holy Quran and swore under oath that Jamal Khan stole money from his office and from Bulbula Sheikh, and she tearfully confessed to him that Jamal raped her when the other employees were out for lunch. Spoken like a pathetic liar and monster deceiver, he truly felt the need to testify and bring justice to this young girl that could no longer speak for herself, and may her soul rest in peace. As the events unfolded in court, Jamal Khan was tried, convicted, and sentenced to 15 years imprisonment under hard labor.